All right, so we have our environment ready to go. We have Git set up. So yeah, let's deploy this thing. This is where it gets a little tricky. So the first thing it says, following once again the instructions, you could follow either on the repo one site, or now that you've effectively, air quotes, forked it over to your own repo, you can do it from yours. So the first thing we want to do is clone the repo down. And so once again, if we go back to your thing here, so we get that. Oh, you're also going to, once again, you can need your personal access token at this point. If you need to do that, it's over, you go click settings, user count stuff, click dev, and you can create one there. There's tons of articles on that, so I'm not going to walk through that here. But what's going to happen is when you actually do your clone, so if I say git clone, and then I put this in, it's going to ask for my user account information. I do a lot of things with Notepad, so I would suggest just make sure you have it in a Notepad ready to go. It's just going to make it a lot easier for you to do that. So here's my Pat, and so I'll come here, and so once my username, so I'm going to go hotmail.com, and that's my Pat. All right. So now if we do an ls, you'll see I have the Big Bang ASE2, so we're going to go into that directory. So we're going to go cd Big Bang ASE2 ls, and so here is that repo. Fantastic. Now you may or may not want to do templates, or I'm sorry, branches. In my example today, I'm going to leave everything in main just because it keeps it a lot simpler. Maybe for your first install you want to try that too, because sometimes with the branching it could get a little confusing where you're at. So I am not doing that. Here's a whole chunk on best practices, but we're going to go right on to creating the GPG key. So I like this. They added a lot. This is a new update here, so it actually shows you how to kind of walk through and see what version you have. Once again, this piece of it is you're creating this key and this private key pair to do SOPs. Once again, SOPs is allowing us to put secrets out into actual GitHub. So we're going to run this command first. And then we're going to do the export. And so I'll tell you this, as we're building this, at this point you kind of want to do this whole process in one big swoop, because you see it's setting this environmental variable FP. It uses it throughout all the deployment steps, so you don't really want to have to come back to this. All right, so created that, and then it shows here we're going to echo that to make sure we have their fingerprint. You can go back and get this later, but it's just easier. Once again, once you start this process, it's better to go all the way through it and make sure it's complete before it loses it in the export. So, because if you log out and log back in, it won't be there. So anyways, they also set it to 1 year expire. I'm going to leave mine alone. I'm going to leave it set to whatever the default is. This piece here, so when you're using SOPs, it has a configuration file that you need to replace. So if you look at those files, you'll see that there's a placeholder for it to put the fingerprint in. So I'm just going to run this guy without explaining that too deeply. Basically, it's taking your environmental variable and replacing that in the SOPs key here. All right, the rest of the stuff is just pushing it back up. I'm not going to check it all. I'm going to check it all in at once. You can go and check each one of these things in as you go if you'd like. But like I said, we have some other changes to the repo to make before we actually do a big push. And so I'm just going to do one push at the end because it's easier with the personal access token. Looks like there's some more tips and tricks on SOPs. A lot of people have issues working with SOPs, like your nodes may not be able to decrypt the files and so forth. So this is a good little troubleshooting thing to understand how SOPs works. But we're going to keep moving here. We're also going to use the default certificate that they show in the Big Bang cert here. So let's go and do this. So cd base. And so in here you have a couple files. They gave you a Big Bang cert file. So if we cat that guy, take a look at it, it actually has the default dev certs. But what it doesn't have is it doesn't have your Iron Bank information that we're about to set, which you set up in here. So they give you, for Istio, they give you a couple different gateway certs to use, which is, for dev, it's fine. So what it wants you to do first is we're going to use the SOPs encryption key, and we're going to take that default template, and you're going to emit it over here to the secrets.yaml. So the environment uses secrets inc YAML to pull the secrets. And so here it took that fingerprint and it SOPs that file, for lack of a better term. So effectively encrypted that file. And once again, it wants you to check that in, but there's a lot of things to do before you check it in. The next thing we need to do, and feel free, obviously, to push these as you go, but I'm going to push everything at the end in one big swoop. The next thing we got to do is add our Iron Bank credentials to the SOPs file, this encryption file here. And so we're going to go into the SOPs editor, or go into Vim. And so as you see here, and it's kind of tricky, this is obviously hard to do on this box. Sometimes I do this actually on a different box, like my actual machine with VS Code. It's a little easier. But what we need to do is we need to give it our registry 1 credentials, Iron Bank account, and the password in the top here in your public key area here. And so we're going to now move here, and hopefully this will work out the first time. Values.yaml. So right above the Istio here, we need to add our registry credentials. And so what I like to do is, once again, I use Notepad heavily. If you go ahead and get your text like this, so what it wants, once you go to Iron Bank and you go into your profile, you can get your personal access token, which is like this, say. And so you need your username and your personal access token, and then you leave the registry. So once again, all the images used with this is in Iron Bank, and it's the hardened images, right? So you need to give Flux and the environment access to that with a personal access token. So I'm just going to copy this guy. Once again, it's easier to kind of format it in Notepad and then come into here and put it in. And hopefully this will just work the first time. So I'm just going to right-click that guy in. And then I got to reformat this to make sure it looks good. And so it needs to go, you want to get this right, because if it doesn't line up correctly, it's not going to be happy. So string values, so let's see, this guy gets to go underneath the L, and then this guy goes underneath the R. This guy goes underneath the R, and then Istio T goes there. That, and then that should be good. Okay, hopefully that lines up good. So escape, :W, :Q. All right, and so just a side note, so if I cat that file, so I'm at ls cat, and so the reason why this is, and this is what SOPs looks like, so you'll see, it has all the certs and everything's encrypted, so you can't see, so it's kind of double encrypted as far as that cert there, but everything's encrypted here. So, and then it tells you the fingerprint it wants to use, which is down here. So that's SOPs in a nutshell. Okay, so that is our pull credentials. Okay, the next piece we need to do is, and once again, I'm just walking through it, and I will do a big push at the end, but doing this each time, you have to put your GitHub pat in there each time. It's kind of frustrating, so I just do it in one big swoop. Next, we got to tell Flux where to reconciliate the environment. So how it's going to kind of work is Flux is going to hit your Big Bang YAML. It's going to do a customization on it. It's going to bring in all the defaults for Big Bang, and then it's going to push that out and reconcile it to your cluster, right? Okay, so we are going to go back, cd, and ls, and then we're going to go to dev, ls. So here is our Big Bang YAML file. And so what it wants you to do effectively is, so we're going to go Big Bang .yaml. So in here, this is what tells the environment where to pull everything from. And so you see, like here is where we need to add our URL. So once again, go back to your repo if you don't have it saved somewhere, and we're going to get this here. So once again, HTTPS, not the SSH, but the HTTPS one. We'll copy that guy. And then that's the URL. Here. It's always so frustrating to use. URL, HTTPS. Make sure that's good. GitHub. And then the branch I'm using is main. All right, everything else, and so it's using Flux Toolkit, everything else, so we're going to hit escape, Control W to write, and then Control Q to exit, and just cat it one time to make sure we're good. This is probably the hardest part of this whole setup, is making sure everything is lined up, and obviously using these tools is a little difficult. It's a little easier to use in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so that was the dev. Pull credentials, configure GitOps. Okay, so configure GitOps. So we changed directory to dev. We set our URL. We set the branch. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and do one big push once again, because, like I said, that personal access token thing's a little frustrating to keep pasting in. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m everything, and then git push. And then my login is this. If I could spell, that's not going to work. Push dscope at hotmail.com, and then, all right. So now everything is set up for Flux to reconciliate against our environment. Now, earlier in I think video 2 or 3, we did kube control and we connected to our cluster. So let's just make sure we're still connected. Git ns. Cool. And so, like when we provisioned a cluster, we went out there and changed it to Microsoft Azure Government, and now this is our Azure Stack Edge Kubernetes cluster. All right, first thing we need to do is create the namespace Big Bang. Cool. So now if we do that again, you should see the Big Bang. Now we need to export the secret key into the cluster as a secret for Big Bang. And so we can just take this line of code here. And so what this all does is it says the secret export into, remember I told you about the FP environmental variable. We're going to write that fingerprint rather, into the cluster as a secret, so SOPs can, and so Kubernetes can actually do the decryptions. Okay, so now we create our secrets. Now we need to create a system namespace for Flux. Okay, and this piece here is, I got these in Notepad once again, so you're going to actually give, for the first reconciliation or thereabouts, it needs, Kubernetes is going to have the Docker, your registry settings for GitHub, and the settings for your repository for Iron Bank. So once again, when it first reconciliates, it pulls those, but it actually will read those ultimately from the YAML files. And so, but the initial setup, it needs those secrets. And so what you're going to do is what I've done is actually just create these in a Notepad, so I can just cut and paste them in, because what you want to do is you got to replace obviously your Docker username here with your Iron Bank account, and then your personal access token here. So I've already done that in mine. On this Notepad, I believe it is. Let's see. Just makes it easier to deploy once you have these things already set up. Right here. So once again, create secret Docker registry. So here is my account. This one here. And so here's my for Flux system. You need to give it the environmental variable. And so, like I said, I just put this in Notepad. It's easier. So Flux system now has the ability to connect to Iron Bank to pull those images down initially. Ultimately, it'll pull it from the SOPs file, but for the initial reconciliation, Flux has to have a way to do that. Flux Big Bang has to have access to your GitHub account, which is this. And so we put that here. And so now the Kubernetes environment has the ability to do that stuff. So very cool. We're all set to deploy. So once I just following these steps here, you got to give Flux the environment, and then you're going to give Big Bang access to your GitHub account. And now we actually deploy Flux. And so, and once Flux deploys, it's going to look at those that repository, and it's going to realize that it needs to reconcile Big Bang. So then it's going to do the customization. It's going to pull those things down and start deploying all the different services. So at this point, Customize is built in a kube control. So I'm not sure why they're using Customize directly, but I basically do it from the customization from the kube control. So that command is basically this right here. And so you just say kubectl apply K for customization, and you give it the repo that you want to reconciliate. So in this case, I'm going to run 129, and so that's this step right here. And actually, they're doing 1.3. And actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'll do the same thing, because it looks like they've updated it since this video. So I'm going to tell it to reconciliate against that one. Let's see what happens here. So at this point, when I deploy this guy, it's going to start doing all the stuff for Flux. And so they also have some code here you can run that basically will tell you the status of the environment. And so if we run this, it'll actually tell you when Flux is set up and ready to roll. So you see here, it's doing the Helm controller. Most of the stuff here we're going to use is from a Helm controller, so Helm releases. So troubleshooting this is you want to really get underneath using Helm, because it does everything with Helm. And so once we have Flux in place, the next step is going to be, okay, so that's good. So that shows us everything's deployed. So if we say NS, and now you see a Flux system. So let's just kind of see what's in there. So if I say get pods -n, and Flux is running. So we have the Helm controller, customization controller, notification service, and the source controller all operational for Flux. So what Flux is waiting for now is for us to apply Big Bang, and then it will reconciliate. Okay, so we're going to do here, so we're back up. Let me see where we're at. ls, so ls dev. So here's our Big Bang file, and once again, so I went up a level, pushed everything out to my repo, and now we're ready to actually deploy. So you need to go to either prod or dev, and currently our customizations and everything are set up for dev, so we're going to deploy in dev for today. And so, and there's more instructions in the repo to show how to move to production and how to change your certs and all that good stuff. But for deploying today, we're going to use the dev environment. So change directories to your dev, and then all we do is this. We're going to apply. But actually, let's do this first. Let's get a customization. So you'll see right now, there's no resources for customizations in Big Bang. What I like to do before I actually pull the trigger on applying the Big Bang YAML is make sure that you're aware of these commands here, because as it's deploying, you're going to want to watch what it's doing. So if you're looking at customizations, you'll see it start bringing Big Bang in, and you'll start seeing it doing the reconciliation. You could look at the different pieces. This one here is key. So once again, everything we do is Helm release. So if you do kubectl get Helm release all, you'll see it start reconciliating those things. But let's get the magic going. I'm going to go ahead and apply this. And so now we just put Big Bang out there. Actually, we did not put Big Bang out there. I'm in the wrong directory. Sorry. Let me go back to dev. Now we put Big Bang out there. So now it's trying to do reconciliation. So let's see. Get namespaces. So if we run these commands, you'll see it start doing some stuff. Trying to go quick here because you got to go fast to see what it's doing. Okay, so right now we have one repository. So once again, everything Flux is doing is all based on repositories and reconciliating against those things. So if you keep looking at this, soon you'll see, okay, so now it has two. So now it's pulling the environment repo down from, so it's done the customization, and now it's starting to bring all those repositories in. So if you keep running this, and you can do a watch, I like just running everyone like a little bit here, but if you keep watching this, it'll start bringing in all these repos. And let's take a look here. See if it's done that yet. Okay, so it's applied the first version of Big Bang, and so now it's reconciling. So it's pulling all those namespaces in. You should start seeing a bunch of those repos getting pulled in. We can look at the secrets and config maps here. So it should pull the default config map in. Okay, so it has the default ones. It has the environment in here, and you see it starting to has the different secrets in here. And if we go, I like just running this one, -A, capital A. Okay, so you'll start seeing it kind of reconciliating these things in a second here. Sometimes you got to keep running this over and over again to kind of see what's happening. So it takes a while for it to reconciliate. Like I said earlier in the presentation, you need to give it a while to reconciliate. So what I'm going to do now, in your repository, you can keep running these to kind of see what's happening on your kubectl. See if I can see anything else going on, but it's going to probably take a good 30 minutes for this to reconciliate. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and then I'm going to get back to this in a second after it reconciliates.